I had already driven 3 blocks from the hotel when I reached for the wrap Elaine had given me and touched an empty passenger seat. I almost kept going, but the night air off Elliott Bay had turned sharp, and I knew exactly where I had left it. I used the side entrance to avoid the last guests, crossed the quiet service hall, and stopped when my father's voice slipped through a half-open office door. "I want the 40% in writing. Gavin, not another promise." Gavin answered without lowering his voice enough. "You get your share when Cecily signs, and we have the wedding footage." Martin asked what happened if I changed my mind, and Gavin gave a small laugh. "She won't cancel with her mother, publisher, and half the city already here. Just get her through the ceremony. Keep Elaine calm, and make sure the release is signed before the flight." That was when I understood what they had built around me. My wedding was not only a wedding to them. It was the final scene of a documentary I had never approved, with my father walking me down the aisle and my mother standing nearby like proof our family had healed. Martin wanted his 40%, and Gavin wanted the footage strong enough to sell the story without asking whether I wanted my life sold with it. My father left through the opposite door, still talking about written terms. I stayed where I was until Daphne Crowley stepped from beside the bar and asked, "After tomorrow, can we stop pretending this is only work?" Gavin pulled her close and kissed her beside the seating chart with my name across the top. His hand settled against her back as he murmured, "Once she signs, everyone gets the version that works." I picked up my wrap, walked outside, locked myself in my car, and typed every sentence into my phone before opening Gavin's waiting email, titled "Wedding Production and Travel Permissions," while my hands were still steady. I drove to Elaine's apartment in Queen Anne, where Jonah was waiting at the table with his laptop open. My mother took one look at me and asked, "What did Gavin do?" I gave them the hallway, the 40%, the kiss, and the email as they happened. When I finished, Jonah turned the screen toward me. "Open the document from your account. Don't download anything yet." The first pages looked ordinary, covering venue access, guest consent, and permission to film the ceremony. Then the language widened. It included family photographs, private recordings, letters, and anything supplied by me or someone described as my family representative. It also gave Gavin temporary authority to approve a promotional cut while I was away and difficult to reach. Jonah searched my messages and found an earlier version attached to a planning email Gavin had sent weeks before. The original title was "Life Story and Archival Materials Release." The version awaiting my signature had been renamed "Wedding Production and Travel Permissions." While the same language sat behind pages resembling routine event paperwork, he didn't simplify it, Jonah said. He hid what it was under a title you wouldn't question. Elaine returned with her phone and opened an email Gavin had sent her privately. He wanted her to appear without telling me, stand beside Martin before the ceremony, and create what he called a 3-generation reconciliation. She had refused because she would not let my wedding turn her marriage into a clean ending. She had kept it from me because she feared one suspicious email would make me think she was trying to stop the wedding. Jonah found a protected link inside the release package and entered the password Gavin used for our wedding calendar. A preview opened before any of us spoke. Martin appeared first in old broadcast footage, then my voice from the book, then Elaine's voice from an interview I had never released. My mother went still beside me as the recording continued, and I understood the film already existed beyond the permission they were still asking me to sign. The preview opened with Martin behind an old news desk, then cut to Elaine describing years spent smiling through family photographs. My narration followed before the screen moved to the night Gavin proposed at my bookstore event. I remembered one phone raised near the front row, but the footage showed 2 angles and sound clear enough to catch my breath before I answered. Someone had planned where I would stand before I knew there was anything to plan. Jonah paused the video and checked the file information. One camera stood near the signing table, while another captured Gavin approaching through the audience. He told me a guest sent him that clip, I said, and Jonah pointed to a timestamp created before the event. Elaine stayed beside me as the preview resumed, and the proposal no longer looked like a private moment someone preserved. The final sequence showed the hotel, the aisle, and an empty space where our wedding footage was supposed to go. White words appeared over the entrance. The family returns to the same room. One last time. Gavin had not been discussing a possible documentary after our marriage. He had sold the ending. And my answer to his proposal had become part of the pitch before I saw the project. I called Ruth Bellamy, the entertainment attorney who reviewed my audiobook agreement, and sent her the release, Elaine's email, and the preview link. She did not promise arrests, lawsuits, or a dramatic win. "Do not sign anything," she said. "Your mother needs to withdraw permission, and the company needs notice that Martin cannot license recordings Cecily created." Ruth explained that filming a public proposal did not automatically make the footage unusable, but presenting it commercially while hiding the purpose created a different problem. She notified Daphne's company and the distributor that the central participant had not consented and several materials had uncertain rights. An hour later, the preview link stopped working, and Gavin texted asking whether I had opened a private production file. Before I answered, Business Affairs emailed me. The documentary had never received final approval and would not move forward until every right was verified. I called Daphne before Gavin could explain the frozen project in a way that protected him. Ruth joined the call and made one point clear: no one was recording, and anything Daphne wanted preserved had to be sent by email. I asked whether she knew I had never signed, whether Martin was promised 40%, and what Gavin had told her about our engagement. Daphne took a breath, then admitted she knew the release was unfinished. "He said you had agreed in principle," she answered. "He said you panic before big decisions, and your father helps you follow through." She knew Martin expected a share, but Gavin had described it as a family participation fee for archival access. When I asked what she believed about us, her voice changed. "He said you knew about me, Cecily. He said the wedding was going forward because canceling it during your book campaign would hurt all three of you." I asked why she kissed him hours before that wedding. Daphne did not deny it or call the moment a mistake. "I had been waiting almost a year. I thought you were keeping the public version until the project was signed." I reminded her that she still knew my signature was missing. She answered quietly, "I believed the explanation that let me keep the project and him." Her email arrived before the call ended. The messages showed Gavin telling her I would finish the ceremony because Martin had put his reputation behind it, then promising that once the wedding footage was secured, they could live openly. Another message said Martin had pushed Gavin to propose sooner because the documentary needed a present-day ending strong enough to sell. Gavin insisted he had wanted marriage, but added that Martin understood when the moment would be worth the most. Daphne read the same messages again while I waited. She had not been waiting for a hollow marriage to end. She had helped package it as proof of healing. Minutes later, her company ordered her off every Cecily Hartwell matter and demanded her correspondence with Gavin for review. Gavin arrived at Elaine's apartment wearing the suit he planned to marry me in, carrying a folder under one arm. He looked rested, cheerful, because he still believed I had only opened the wrong production link. Ruth was already on a video call. Jonah sat beside me, and Elaine stood near the kitchen counter with both hands wrapped around a cold coffee mug. Gavin glanced around the room and softened his voice. "You're nervous. That's all this is." He opened the folder and slid the release toward me. "We just need the final wedding permissions before we leave for the hotel." I asked why a wedding release included my mother's voice and private recordings I had made myself. Gavin called it standard language meant to prevent delays later, then blamed the unfinished preview on an editor who had moved too quickly. When I asked why Elaine's interview appeared before permission existed, he answered, "It was internal. No one outside the team saw it." I placed my phone beside the document and asked where Martin's 40% came from. Gavin did not deny the number. "Who told you that?" was the first thing out of his mouth. And the question confirmed more than an explanation could have. I asked whether Martin had pushed him to propose because the film needed an ending. Gavin stared at me, then said, "I wanted to marry you. We only chose the timing carefully." I removed the ring and set it on top of the signature line. The wedding was canceled. Elaine had withdrawn permission. Ruth had notified the company, and the project was frozen. Gavin's face changed as each fact landed. "You're destroying the biggest opportunity of our lives over a kiss and a conversation you heard through a door." Elaine looked directly at him. "Did you tell Daphne my daughter knew you were sleeping together?" Gavin shifted toward the hallway and began explaining that the situation was complicated. Before he could finish, the buzzer sounded. Martin had arrived because Gavin had called him on the drive over, still convinced my father could get me back into the dress and down the aisle. Martin entered with his coat buttoned, took in the ring on the table, and went straight to Gavin. He did not ask whether I was all right. "This can still be fixed," he said, turning toward me as if the canceled wedding were a scheduling problem. I asked who gave him permission to hand over Elaine's recording, and he answered that the tape had been stored with family materials after the divorce. Elaine set down her mug. "Possession is not permission. Martin." Ruth explained from the laptop that he had signed a statement claiming he controlled every item he supplied. If that statement was wrong, the production company could demand the advance back, along with direct costs tied to those materials. Martin looked at Gavin before admitting the money had already paid for upgraded rooms, additional filming access, and a polished reel meant to restart his television work. He called it an investment in all of us. I asked why the documentary ended with him walking me down the aisle after my mother described what it cost to live inside his version of a family. Martin opened his mouth, then looked away. He had not only wanted 40%, he wanted an audience to watch Elaine's pain, then watch him enter the final scene as the man everyone had forgiven. Gavin broke the silence first. "You told me she would sign." Martin turned on him. "You told me the permissions were handled." Their voices rose as each tried to make the other responsible for believing I could be pushed through the ceremony. I watched them argue over who had misjudged me, while the unsigned release remained beneath my ring. An email reached Martin before either man stopped talking. The production company ordered him to stop using the project's name in his promotional material and prepare to return the advance while ownership of the recordings was reviewed. He stared at the screen, then asked whether I understood what this would cost him. I understood. He had spent money against a version of my life he never had the right to sell. The wedding coordinator sent one message to every guest. The ceremony had been canceled for private reasons, and no further explanation would be given. I did not release Daphne's messages, the preview, or the photograph of my ring on Gavin's paperwork. Gavin had tried to turn my family into content, and I would not finish his work by making our collapse public. By noon, guests knew only that the wedding was over. The project fell apart. Daphne's company closed the file because Elaine and I had never granted the rights Gavin claimed were coming. Their review found that he had described us as committed participants while sending the release hours before the ceremony. The company developing the documentary with him ended its agreement, and 2 crew members asked to have their names removed from the preview. Daphne was taken off matters connected to me, while her employer reviewed the relationship she had failed to disclose. She kept her job, but the promotion tied to the documentary disappeared. When she demanded to know when Gavin planned to leave me, his messages gave her no date, no apartment, and no life beyond the sale. He had promised each of us a different future and scheduled none of them. Martin received a repayment demand for the advance and sold the vintage car he used in promotional photographs. The reel for his television return was canceled, and organizations stopped calling him for events after learning the production had collapsed over consent. He left voicemails insisting he never knew about Daphne. I believed that might be true, but he had known I had not agreed and accepted money anyway. I answered once in writing, "Do not contact me about Gavin, the documentary, or money again. Any relationship we have starts after you repay what you took, and stop calling this help." Elaine stopped carrying his messages, and Jonah refused the loan Martin requested. The guests never heard the story, but everyone who had profited from it saw the project close without my name beneath it. Months later, I hired an attorney who answered only to me, and I stopped letting love, family, and contracts share the same doorway. Elaine and I listened through the interviews again, keeping most between the woman who spoke and the daughter she trusted. Daphne kept her job but lost the promotion, then sent one apology, admitting she had ignored missing signatures because Gavin's version gave her what she wanted. Gavin moved into smaller projects and mailed me a letter insisting his love had been real. I left it unanswered because whatever he felt did not erase what he chose. Martin repaid the advance after selling his car, then asked to meet me in a diner near Lake Union. He began with, "I never meant to hurt you." And I answered, "I'm not asking what you meant. I'm asking you to name what you did." He looked down at his coffee before admitting he believed I would forgive him once the film succeeded. I did not hug him or promise a reunion, but I left knowing he had finally spoken without rewriting the scene. A year later, I was having dinner with a history professor Jonah introduced me to, a man who never opened a draft unless invited. When we stood, he touched the wrap on the chair and asked, "Do you want to carry this? Or should I?" I picked it up myself, and the choice felt ordinary, which was why it mattered. My story no longer needed someone else's ending. Tell me where you're listening from and what choice brought you back at the right moment. Sometimes peace begins when you stop handing other people the pen. I found love again after learning that being chosen means nothing beside being respected. I hope your next chapter belongs to you.